What up, perps? Kid Copious, back in effect. Purple State Party, you know what we're doing here? We're repping America, the center, and common sense. Today, I just got to cover a bunch of issues I really wish I didn't have to cover. Biden's State of the Union. You know, I'll sum it up pretty quickly why I don't like Joe Biden. When he got into office on a bunch of false promises about who he was and what he was going to accomplish, him and his Marxist handlers pushed ahead with an agenda that they knew was not going to work for America because their agenda was not for America. Their agenda was for them. Maybe it's naive to expect political groups, political parties, political leaders to act in our best benefit, but that is the way our government was designed. I understand that these are just a bunch of rich people manipulating us like puppets. But, you know, maybe they could try a little harder. Maybe they could do a few things to actually make our lives better or at least seem better. I don't know. I don't think that's really too much to ask. But we'll get into it more. So let's just get this show popping. All right, before I begin, you know, my typical Biden bashing, I guess, you know, I didn't want to sit here and bash Biden. I was hoping that I'd have to give a lot of credit where credit is due. But unfortunately, that's not the way it worked. And, you know, I just want to start this off, and this is not an I told you so moment at all. This is just people actually realizing the consequences of some of these far left policies. You know, I don't know how else to call it. That's what they are. They're far left policies. But San Francisco passed law and order measures by large margins, including drug screening for welfare recipients. I think that's only fair. I mean, I don't think taxpayers should be subsidizing drug use. You know, I don't know what they're going to classify it as. I don't think alcohol will be on that list where it should be. Hopefully weed isn't. You know, I'm somebody who's been through all the drugs out there. And, you know, as far as I'm concerned, weed is the only good one. You know, there's no such thing as a good or bad molecule. It's what people do with them. But anyhow, the welfare requirement was Proposition F. It got 63%. You know, and it's basically just saying, hey, if we think you're using drugs, we're going to get you tested or you're not getting a check. I think that's only fair. Proposition E, which expanded police surveillance powers and reined in some oversight, had about a 60%. And of course, at the bottom there, it sums it up. Left-wing detractors grumbled about the results, saying they would backfire and reverse progress. What fucking progress? The only progress that these far left policies had was emboldening criminals. The progress was all on the criminal side. I don't see how these programs that they come up with change any of that. And when they're enacted, crime seems to go up. And if you want to talk numbers, remember, numbers are manipulated. Crimes were decommissioned, so to speak. People aren't reporting things. And as I always say, it's not the amount of crime, it's the type of crime. Random smash and grabs. Just people just busting out windows at gas stations. Crime has come to many corners of the world where it wasn't before, and that's the real problem. That's the real problem. But, you know, they talk about reversing progress, and one of the things that I find that's, you know, most fascinating about the people on the left, you know, I mean, look, I live in California, okay? When I hear unhinged people, it's mostly coming from the left. I mean, I hear unhinged things from the right, but they're lizard people unhinged, you know? They're a whole nother brand of crazy. They're not something that somebody's actually going to implement. But they're the one thing that gets me about both extremes, and the reason why I think we need to ignore this and go back to ignoring the extremes, is that they pick up causes to justify their shitty behavior. A lot of people who say they support women's athletics and don't want biological men competing are using it to be transphobic as an excuse to not like trans people. And I think that's bullshit. And I think it's also bullshit how the left uses something like Candace Owens as a great example. She's a black woman who happens to be a conservative, so they're allowed to use the N-word against her. See, that's the kind of bullshit that the extremes bring that I just don't, I personally don't get. But, here's a great example of it. Talking about how the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that Trump couldn't be kept off the ballot in Colorado. So this youngster up there, don't know who he is. He has a check mark. Am I supposed to know who he is? I don't fucking know. If you know, put it down in the comments because I ain't wasting my time looking it up. Insurrection sympathizer Clarence Thomas ruled that insurrectionist Donald Trump can remain on ballot in 2024. That should be the headline. Notice it's all insurrection. Their side burning down entire towns was protest for George Floyd. But the persistence fired back. The ruling was 9-0 and you attacked the black man. Figures. See, it justifies them. These extreme groups feel that the other side is so vile and evil that anything you say or do to them is justified. And that's not the way it works. That's not the way it's supposed to work. Just because a black person votes Republican, that's their choice. Why is it that when it comes to other choices or ways of people being born, why is it that the left goes out of their way to protect them, but not members of these impoverished or underrepresented or whatever buzzword they want to attach to it? Those people are fair game if they don't vote the way you vote. See, that's the fascists, and that's why places like groups like Antifa are such BS. They claim to be anti-fascist, but then they use the fascist tactics. It's, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, right? And here's another great example of it. This blob of a human here, it attacked a painting in England, spray painted it, and then slashed it. A work of art. Something that belongs to the people. And why? In protest of Palestine, the Palestine Action Group. And one thing I got to ask these pro-Palestinian people, where were you pre-October 7th? Where were you? Were you standing up against what Hamas was doing? How Hamas was stealing resources to build their own terror tunnels? No, you weren't there. You're being revved up. And you know why you're being revved up? Because summer's coming. And we already know what's going to happen. Right around July 4th, we're going to get a tweet from the Biden administration talking about how much cheaper hot dogs are than last year. Right? And then by the end of July, beginning of August, we're going to find some black guy who dies during an interaction with the police. And you're going to burn cities down for much of August, much of September. College kids will probably have to go back to school, middle of September, run up to the election. This is keeping troops in the field. But this is also a way for these people to now lump all kinds of hatred on Jewish people. They spit on Jewish people. I'm pretty sure it was Hamas who started this. And I'm sorry that the people of Gaza are made to suffer with their choices. But they elected Hamas. They share the same beliefs as Hamas. Okay? I didn't see anything about the people of Gaza rising up against Hamas. And another thing to keep in mind, unlike the past, where armies would meet on a field and fire shots at each other, what we have nowadays is terrorists who hide amongst civilians. So, sadly, yes, there will be lots of civilian deaths. That's the battlefield. I didn't choose it. Israel didn't choose it. Israel was just chilling out on the 7th. All right? Hamas started this. The people of Palestine, the people of Gaza started this. And if Israel was to leave, Hamas would just resume attacks. We already know this. But it gives these people the justification to act like animals. And that's what they are, animals. Look, Jewish musician Mata Hassu, probably butchered that. He had to cancel because of a pro-Palestinian protest. You're not protesting for the Palestinian people, okay? You're protesting against Israel. You don't like Jews. And the worst part about this story is that Palestinians, Gazans, Hamas, right? They don't like gay people. They don't like alternative people. They don't like free speech. They don't value women's rights at all. And yet you support them against a country that supports alternative women, blah, 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 blah. You're being kept in the field. I know nobody who goes to these things is even going to hear this message. But somehow we got to get the message across to them that they're being used. They're absolutely being used. And going back to that Supreme Court ruling and Antifa and the anti-fascists, Democrats announced bill to kick Trump off the ballot. This dude Raskin is collaborating with Swalwell. You remember him? He's the guy who was dating a Chinese spy. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who employed a spy, is going to revive legislation that they're going to set up a process in which they can determine that somebody who committed insurrection is disqualified by Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Well, first of all, Trump was never convicted of insurrection. It wasn't an insurrection. It was, to use their own words, a mostly peaceful protest that got slightly out of hand. But sure, that's your tactic. That's your tactic from the anti-fascist group to use lawfare, to do whatever it takes to keep Trump off the ballot so you can continue winning. But we're losing. We've seen that. They're putting their crazy extreme left agenda ahead of the needs of America. And here it is. Biden administration secretly flew in 320,000 inadmissible illegal migrants amidst Operation Creates Vulnerabilities. Yeah. Look at that. They got caught with their hands in the cookie jar. Did we need more people post-pandemic? No, we are having a hard enough time right now in our states and in our country taking care of the people that we have. We have areas that don't even have clean drinking water. Go back to Flint, Michigan right there. You know, we have states that are seeing crumbling infrastructure and they don't have the money for it. We're seeing a decline in education across the board. We are seeing just the extremes taking hold. And instead of fighting that, the Biden administration is flying in migrants, as if the 8 million who are just showing up at the border aren't enough. They fly inadmissible aliens over the border and directly to U.S. airports. That is just fucking insane. Is Biden helping these third world dictators drain their prisons? Because they're coming in from Haiti. Look what's going on in Haiti, Cuba, Venezuela, even Honduras, Ecuador. These are places that are having problems and would certainly love to get rid of, political opposition, criminals, things like that. They apply through a mobile app. That's how desperate they are to get more people in here. You get enough people in, you get more representatives. Because the census counts illegals just as much as it counts citizens. Lawful pathway struggle. Reportedly designed to reduce the number of migrants illegally coming across the southern border. Well, why? But by flying them in? It's not where they come in. It's even the fact that they're here. They were pre-approved on a cell phone app. To them, their agenda is worth more than the United States. The United States doesn't even warrant something more than a cell phone app. So, despite all the problems that faces like the state of California or the United States as a whole, as immediately Biden and his Marxist extreme left handlers started blowing money that we don't have on electric vehicles. And every day it seems that dream of theirs is dying. Tesla used to have and a lot of the EVs that were coming out had self-driving modes. But because of the invariable accidents of letting a car drive itself, accidentally stopping and blocking fire trucks or just driving off the road, the rules about self-driving had to be updated to the point now where self-driving has been reduced to useless. And people who own Teslas paid like 10 grand extra for this. Money down a rat hole. More money down a rat hole. The chargers. They get vandalized. They get broken. They get crowded. And most people can't charge at home. EVs are a quick little zippy car, kind of like a golf cart. People who own them love them. That's great. But they can afford to charge them at home. They can get the chargers put in. But this morning while I was preparing, I heard a man speaking about Toyota's 1690. And I found this so interesting. The rare earth minerals, the minerals that require the most polluting to get to, the most child labor, the most forced labor, all that kind of crap. Those minerals, right? To make one electric vehicle, you could make 6 plug-in hybrids, which again requires you to charge it at home or at a charging station. Or you could take those same materials and make 90 hybrids. And when all the calculations are done, those 90 hybrids, straight hybrids, reduce the carbon footprint of cars by 37% more than the 1 EV or the 6 plug-ins. It's just simple math. And now, I've mentioned it before about particulates. It pollutes the air we breathe. And EVs, because they're heavier, their brake pads produce more particulates, and their tires produce way more particulates. Standard combustion engine cars are producing so little right now that if we were to start making our acceptable limits, we wouldn't even touch them because they produce almost next to nothing in terms of particulates. It's the tires, it's the brakes. And that's what EVs fail at. They make the air dirtier. So if California went to the EPA and said that we need to ban gas cars because they make particulates like dust, dirt, and soot, and if we don't do this, we're going to be going back to our days of thick smog. So the EPA gives them a variance because you're not allowed to make laws that would affect other states. That's a whole other subject. But now we find EVs produce more of those. So the waiver is invalid. So the whole idea of outlawing gas-powered vehicles is ridiculous and no longer has a legal leg to stand on. We'll see if that changes anything. But again, the government that we see right now is not a government of the people. Most of us out there really are facing taxation without representation. They're doing what they want, The way that they got here is just so gross. They just assumed that an EV and an internal combustion engine would have the same amount of particulate matter emissions. So the tiny amount that comes from the gas makes all the difference. Today's cars are so clean that almost all the particulate matter comes from tire wear. And then the next percentage is brakes. Right here, He talks about the data that California included in the regulatory proposal sent to the EPA review included an assumption that EVs will eventually be as light as gas-powered vehicles, without substantiating how automakers will make that a reality. It's just fantasy. Everything that they're telling us about EVs is fantasy. Well, in other lies the government likes to tell, they like to claim that the southern border is not open and that they can't do anything because the Republicans blocked their bill. Biden threw out everything that Trump did. He used executive orders to stop the border construction, the wall construction. He cleared the stay in Mexico things right off the books. Get rid of it, get rid of it. And now he proposes a bill that focuses more on how to make people legal than actually stopping the flow of humans across the border. He says, well, they didn't vote for that bill, so there's nothing I can do. Where's all the executive orders? Where is it? Where is the fact that you just undid all of Trump's border policies that were somewhat working and replaced them with nothing? And now, of course, you blame the Republicans. But this is what the reality of it looks like. Illegal immigrants, free food, housing, healthcare. Sign up here. Hi, I'm an illegal immigrant. And the guy's holding a homeless vet sign behind him. They're flat out ignoring citizens to make this happen. Okay? That's my biggest problem with it. Forget the fact that Maduro's emptying his jails across the border. The fact that we're making it so enticing, because they have a plan, whether it's to get cheap labor or future votes or to raise your representative account in a city by adding in millions of new people so you get more representation. That's the sad thing about busing immigrants to Austin and Chicago and all these other blue cities. Those blue cities will get more representatives. Look, I don't have a problem with Democrats. The problem I have is that they're catering to the extremists. This is Denver right here. Denver Mayor Mike Johnson started making budget cuts to city departments to offset the cost of migrant services, announcing reduced hours at rec centers and rolling closures of DMVs. Yeah. So the average citizen will have to suffer now or will be inconvenienced so that we can support all of these people who just showed up at our border. That's not helpful. It is not our job to take care of the world. It is not our job to go to the one-armed man and chop off our own arm and give it to him, because that's what we're doing. These are unprecedented numbers. And the thing that makes it the worst is there's absolutely no checks going on. You have people coming in with bringing in disease. You have criminals coming across. You have people who are just here to take advantage. I guess grifters who want to come here and just panhandle because they're panhandling in their country and they don't make as much, so they come here. And they want to panhandle here. Hey, granted, look, I'm sure a large portion of the people who have come across the border are going to simply, eventually, get citizenship and get a job and do the jobs that the privileged people of this country won't do. That's fine, okay? But when you're talking about nearly 8 million people, even 10% of that is way too much for us to absorb. Especially post-pandemic, when we have to rebuild this country, not make it even more wobbly. Speaking of wobbly, Biden called Lincoln Riley in the State of the Union, and says she was killed by an illegal. Very interesting. Yeah. That's, he was prodded by Marjorie Taylor Greene and straight up called her Lincoln. Said she was killed by an illegal. And then Pelosi, of course, because, Pelosi ripped for saying Biden should have called Lakeland Riley's alleged killer undocumented, not illegal. Because changing the word seems to make everything better, right? Mm-hmm. You know what? We're just, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. See, Mayorkas here, he even banned the use of illegal alien for his employees. Yeah, no, they should be, We think if we change the name of things, it makes it better. Mm-hmm. And then, to further back it up, the Cato Institute came out and found that if you compare people who enter the country illegally and native-born Americans in Texas, he found that those entering illegally had a lower homicide conviction rate, 2.4 per 100,000, than native-born Americans. I don't even understand. The hell's his point? You can't do anything about native-born Americans. But it's the illegals that don't need to be here. I mean, we found out that the brother of the man who killed Ms. Riley has ties to Venezuelan gangs. So then the killer of Lakeland Riley has a brother who has ties. So then he has ties. See, they're not being vetted at all because that's not the plan. The plan isn't to move, hardworking immigrants into our country. It's to simply just kick open the border and let everybody come in, and we'll see how we can make that benefit us. But, right now the House just passed the Lakeland Riley Act, and that's one of the things that makes this case stand out, was not only was the killer illegal, but he had been busted a couple of times. If you're going to come into this country illegally or legally, however you get here, you need to be held to a higher standard. Sorry, but you have to have rules. You have to have some sort of standard, or it's just a joke. So the bill would require federal authorities to detain illegal immigrants arrested for or charged with any burglary, theft, larceny, or shoplifting offenses. There you go. Doesn't that make sense? Higher standards. If you land here, if you sneak in here, and we catch you doing something wrong, you're going back. That's standards. Also at the State of the Union, a Gold Star dad was arrested for demanding Biden remember son who died in botched Afghanistan withdrawal. And he was arrested. I mean, I guess you can make the claim that anybody who stood up in the State of the Union and was heckling Biden or heckling the president would probably be arrested. But not a good look. Let's just say that. Let's just leave it at that. Not a great look. But it reminds us of how, again, the agenda was to pull out of Afghanistan. It wasn't to get our troops home safely. It wasn't to do it in a way that made sense or that didn't leave billions of dollars in weaponry behind. No, the agenda that they had was get out. So they got out. They don't care about the consequences of their actions. Tired this week. It's just... we do better when we're united. That's just something history has proven. And to see the extremes on display sometimes is just disheartening. But playing to those extremes, Biden slams America's conduct during World War II in an attempt to criticize Israel. Yeah. So he criticized the Jewish state by saying they have been consumed with rage in their war against Hamas and have lost the moral high ground. Really? Really, they've lost the moral high ground. After the events of October 7th, and we'll get into it a little bit more. Yeah, Israel's lost the moral high ground. All right. Biden went on to detail a conversation he had with members of Israel's War Cabinet, who defended the war in Gaza by noting that America had carpet bombed Germany in the Second World War. Biden responded by suggesting we should not have done so. And what Biden said here, that's why we ended up with the United Nations and all these rules about not doing that again. People on the extreme left, they love to worship bad people. They love being on the side of somebody like Hamas. And now, because Joe Biden is so wedded to those extremists, he's going to say that America shouldn't have carpet bombed Germany. He's going to say that the Jewish state leaders have become consumed with rage, that they've lost the moral high ground. So Hamas is the victim here. Germany is the victim here. Really? Okay. If you don't see the problem in that, then, you're probably not watching this. You probably haven't stuck through all my other butchered rants. This is just sick to me. The reports that have come out, the fact that we now have Michigan Democrats voting uncommitted because it's a protest vote. Days later, after all of this crap, right? A senior Hamas official came out and said, Biden must pressure Israel into a ceasefire deal. Ceasefire only benefits Hamas. It is now in the hands of the Americans, if they are serious about achieving a ceasefire before Ramadan, to exercise enough pressure on Israeli. Senior Hamas official Bassem Naim said. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't want to reach an agreement, and the ball is now in America's court. America is going to side with Hamas to placate the extreme left, and they don't see a problem in that. If you could sort out Hamas from a Gazan, great. Great. It's not the way it works. Hamas started this war. Plain and simple. What did they think was going to happen after October 7th? They thought that America, under the weak leadership of Biden, would pressure the Israelis into a ceasefire, thus allowing Hamas to go in and rape and torture Jews, not even necessarily Jews, Israelis, and get away with it. And what's Biden doing? Exactly what Hamas wanted and believed was going to happen. Siding with criminals. UN says it's found evidence that Israeli hostages experience violence, sexual violence in Gaza. I don't even want to read some of what they're saying. But we know about it. We saw the videos of people describing what happened. We saw the aftermath of that. These are just depraved people who attacked another country. And now the United States of America, of which I'm a citizen, is putting pressure on Israel to stop. We're building a temporary dock to get food aid into Palestine, Gaza. Who's going to take that? Hamas. That's who's going to take it. Hamas is going to get it all. And in fact, we've even had a food drop now that landed on 5 people and killed them. That's how bad we are at doing these kind of things. I'm telling you, man, this is just brutal on me. This is so hard to just imagine that the United States is essentially siding with Hamas. It really is. And the UN took 5 months to recognize what was going on over there. The hostages are being tortured. Most of the hostages are probably dead, sadly. You are dealing with a group of depraved animals. We should be helping Israel. And instead, the extremists say, no, help Hamas. And Biden says, this week started off with those measures passed in San Francisco. And I thought, wow, we're making some progress back to sanity, to the center, to common sense. And then the rest of the week, it was just article after article of how much work has to be done. And this is just the extreme left. We don't hear very much about the extreme right because, well, quite frankly, most people agree that the extreme right is just wrong, okay? But the extreme left is supported by people with money, people with power, people with newspapers, websites, whatever it is. And their lies take a lot longer to expose. Hopefully, we're getting closer and closer to realizing that going with the extremes means that they are going to put an agenda above the common good. And the common good is what we should be looking to protect first. Start with the common good. Once you get that settled, move on. Once we had fixed the broken parts of America after the pandemic and all this shit that went on with the election and all that crap, then maybe we start trying to figure out bringing people into this country. Maybe we start figuring out how to reform immigration or the criminal justice system. But no, these people had a harebrained idea, and they weren't going to be stopped by common sense. No, they were going to plow ahead. And look where we are. People in America supporting Hamas. You could say I'm wrong. You could say, oh, no, they're supporting the people of Palestine. Yeah, they're not. It's Hamas. And that's just the grossest thing. I don't think we've ever really sided with just straight up evil to this level. And, I don't think Biden's going to fix it. And I don't think Trump's going to fix it. So, we might be stuck in this for a while. Anyhow, I apologize. It's not been my best show. I'm just very agitated. But what can you do? I'm who I am. I'm Kid Copious. I'm Purple State Party. So are you. Love one another. Try not to be stupid. Make sure you drink water. That's the number one thing you could do for your health. And, when, life socks you in the face, dance it out.